Before we dive deep into what might be the most profound realization of your entire existence, I need to ask you something. What time is it where you are right now? And where exactly are you watching this from? I'm asking because the exact moment you chose to click on this video, the precise time on your clock, the location you're sitting in right now, none of it is a coincidence. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why the ancient mystics predicted you'd be here, reading these words, at this exact moment in your spiritual evolution. You've probably been told your whole life that consciousness is just something your brain produces, like some kind of biological computer generating the illusion of you, right? They taught you in school that when you think, when you feel, when you experience this thing called awareness, it's nothing more than neurons firing, chemicals dancing across synapses, matter creating the miracle of mind. But what if I told you that's not just wrong? It's exactly backwards. What if consciousness isn't something your brain creates at all, but rather something your brain receives, like a radio tuning into a frequency that's been broadcasting since before the universe began? What if every ancient civilization, every mystery school, every enlightened master throughout history has been trying to tell you the same secret? And what if the proof of this truth is literally everywhere around you right now, hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to finally wake up and see it? Here's what they don't want you to realize. The reason this knowledge has been suppressed, fragmented, hidden behind walls of esoteric symbolism and dismissed as primitive superstition by modern science. Because once you understand what consciousness really is, once you grasp where you really are and what you're really doing here, everything changes, the entire game reveals itself, and you can never go back to sleep again. The ancient Vedic text said it thousands of years ago, Tatvamasi I. Thou art that, you are not I am the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself, and the Hermetic masters encoded it in their most sacred axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. And the Buddhist teachers pointed directly at it when they spoke of emptiness and form being one and the same, and the Egyptian initiates learned it in the mystery schools of Kemet, and the Kabbalists mapped it in the tree of life, and the Gnostics died protecting this knowledge from those who wanted to keep humanity enslaved in ignorance. Every single tradition, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, all arriving at the exact same conclusion about the nature of consciousness and reality. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. Modern physics, despite trying so hard to prove materialism correct, keeps accidentally discovering the same ancient truths. Quantum mechanics has shattered the illusion of objective reality. The observer effect proves that consciousness collapses probability waves into physical matter. The double-slit experiment shows that particles exist in superposition until someone observes them. Entanglement demonstrates that separation is an illusion and everything is connected beyond space and time. And the holographic principle suggests the entire universe might be a projection from information encoded on a two-dimensional surface. Exactly like the ancient mystics said reality was Maya, an illusion, a divine play of consciousness. But let's go deeper, because you need to understand where you are right now. Not just physically, but cosmically, spiritually, dimensionally. You see, the ancient mystery schools taught that consciousness exists in layers, dimensions, frequencies of vibration, and what you call physical reality is actually the densest, slowest vibrating level of consciousness. It's like ice compared to water compared to steam. Same substance, different states, and your body. This meat suit you're walking around in. It's not who you are, it's a vehicle. A temporary avatar that consciousness is piloting through this particular density of experience. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes it exactly. It explains the bardos, the intermediate states between death and rebirth, and how consciousness navigates through different realms and dimensions. And here's the key. You're not just in those states after death. You're navigating them right now. Every single night when you sleep, every time you daydream, every moment of meditation or altered consciousness, you're literally shifting between frequencies, between dimensions of awareness, and most people have no idea this is happening because they've been conditioned to believe consciousness is local, trapped inside their skull. But it's not. The ancient Egyptians knew this. That's why they spent so much time preparing for death. Not because they were obsessed with mortality, but because they understood that death was just a transition, a shift in consciousness from one frequency to another. And the entire purpose of life was to become conscious enough, awakened enough, to navigate that transition with awareness instead of being swept along unconsciously into the next incarnation. And this is exactly what the mystery schools taught. The initiations weren't just symbolic rituals. They were actual technologies for expanding consciousness, for learning to operate at higher frequencies while still in the physical body, for remembering who and what you really are beyond the illusion of separation and form. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. And this is where the ancient prophecies and the modern moment collide in the most extraordinary way. The Vedic texts describe vast cycles of time called yugas, and according to these calculations, we are transitioning out of the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness and materialism and spiritual ignorance, and into the Satya Yuga, the golden age of truth and enlightenment and expanded consciousness. And the Mayans encoded similar knowledge in their calendar systems, not predicting the end of the world in 2012, but the end of a cycle, the beginning of a new era of consciousness. And the Hopi prophecies speak of the transition from the fourth world to the fifth world. And the ancient Egyptians built the Great Pyramid aligned to astronomical cycles that mark massive shifts in human consciousness. And even the precession of the equinoxes, this 26,000-year cycle that astronomy confirms is absolutely real, marks the movement through different ages that correspond to different states of collective human consciousness. So, where does that put you right now? Exactly where the mystics said you'd be, at the threshold, at the tipping point, at the moment when the veil between dimensions is thinner than it's been in thousands of years, at the exact point in the cycle when consciousness is ready to make a quantum leap. And that's not metaphorical, it's literal. You are living through the most significant consciousness shift in human history. And the fact that you're here, watching this, feeling something resonate deep in your soul as you hear these words, that's not random. That's exactly the awakening they predicted. But let's talk about what consciousness actually is, because this is where everything comes together. Modern science still can't explain consciousness. They call it the hard problem. They can map every neuron, track every brain wave, measure every chemical, but they cannot explain why there's something it's like to be you, why there's subjective experience, why there's an I that witnesses all of this. And that's because they're looking in the wrong place. Consciousness doesn't emerge from matter. Matter emerges from consciousness. And the ancient Vedic philosophy explained this perfectly, with the concept of Brahman, the infinite consciousness that is the ground of all being, the field of pure awareness from which all of reality arises. And you, your individual consciousness, what the Vedas call Atman, is not separate from that infinite consciousness. It's a localized expression of it, like a wave that appears separate from the ocean but is made of the ocean. The ocean has never been anything but the ocean. The Hermetic masters taught the same truth in the Kybalion. The all is mind, the universe is mental. Reality is a mental construct, a thought in the mind of infinite consciousness, and you are a thought thinking itself. Awareness becoming aware of awareness, consciousness experiencing consciousness through the illusion of separation and form. And this isn't just philosophy or mysticism. This is exactly what quantum physics is discovering. The universe behaves like information, like consciousness, not like stuff. Particles aren't solid things, they're probability waves, patterns of potential, and consciousness is what collapses those potentials into actual experience. You are literally creating reality with your observation, with your awareness, with your consciousness, and the mystics knew this thousands of years before we had laboratories and particle accelerators. Now here's the really forbidden part. The knowledge they really don't want you to have. If consciousness is primary, if reality is created by consciousness, then you have far more power than you've ever been told. You're not a victim of circumstance. You're not at the mercy of external forces. You're not powerless in a random universe. You are a creator, a divine spark of infinite consciousness with the ability to shape your reality through your awareness, your intention, your vibrational frequency. And this is why every control system throughout history has worked so hard to keep you ignorant of your true nature, because a population that knows it's divine, that understands its consciousness having a temporary physical experience, that realizes it's creating its reality through its beliefs and perceptions, that population is impossible to control, impossible to manipulate, impossible to enslave. The ancient Gnostics understood this. That's why they were hunted down and destroyed. They taught that the physical world was created by a false god, the demiurge, an ignorant consciousness that trapped divine sparks in matter and convinced them they were limited, mortal, powerless, and that the path to liberation was gnosis, direct knowledge, direct experience of your true nature as consciousness, as spirit, as divine awareness that exists beyond and before the physical illusion. And when you achieve that gnosis, that awakening, you see through the illusion, you remember who you are, and you can no longer be controlled by the systems and structures that depend on your ignorance and fear. The Buddhist teachings point to the same truth through different language. Samsara, the cycle of birth and death and suffering, is maintained by ignorance, by avidya, by not knowing your true nature. And when you awaken, when you achieve enlightenment, you realize that nirvana and samsara are not two different places. They're two different perceptions, two different states of consciousness. The world doesn't change. Your awareness changes, and suddenly you're free, liberated, awakened, not by going somewhere else, but by seeing clearly what's always been true. Now let's talk about the proof, because this isn't just theory or belief. The evidence is everywhere once you know how to look. Start with near-death experiences. Thousands upon thousands of documented cases of people who were clinically dead. No brain activity, no heartbeat. Yet they report vivid, coherent experiences. They describe leaving their bodies, watching the resuscitation efforts from above, traveling through tunnels of light, meeting deceased relatives, experiencing a life review, encountering beings of light. And here's what's extraordinary. The experiences are remarkably consistent across cultures, religions, ages, backgrounds. People who've never heard of each other describe the same phenomena, the same stages, the same realizations, and many report information they couldn't possibly have known, describing conversations that happened while they were dead, seeing things in other rooms, knowing events that occurred miles away. And when researchers verify these claims, they turn out to be accurate. Consciousness was clearly functioning and perceiving when the brain was not, exactly as the ancient mystics said. Consciousness is not produced by the brain. It exists independently and uses the brain as an interface with physical reality. Look at the evidence from reincarnation research. Scientists like Ian Stevenson spent decades documenting thousands of cases of children who spontaneously remember previous lives. And these aren't vague feelings or general impressions. These children provide specific, verifiable details, names, addresses, how they died, where they lived, family members, events that occurred, and when researchers investigate, they find the details are accurate. The places existed, the people lived, the events happened exactly as the child described. And there's no normal explanation for how a 3-year-old in India could accurately describe the specific details of a person who died in a village 50 miles away before the child was born. Unless consciousness continues, unless memory exists beyond the physical brain, unless reincarnation is real, exactly as the Hindus and Buddhists and ancient Egyptians taught for thousands of years. Consider the evidence from consciousness studies in meditation and psychedelics. Brain scans of experienced meditators show that as consciousness expands, as awareness becomes more vast and clear, brain activity actually decreases, particularly in the default mode network, the part of the brain associated with a sense of separate self, the ego, and psychedelic research is discovering the same pattern. As people report experiencing cosmic consciousness, union with the divine, the dissolution of boundaries between self and universe, their brain activity shows less coherence, less integration, the opposite of what you'd expect if the brain was generating consciousness. It's as if the brain is a filter, a reducing valve as Aldous Huxley described it. And when that filter is relaxed through meditation or temporarily disrupted through psychedelics, more consciousness comes through, not less, exactly as the ancient mystery school initiates discovered through their sacred practices. And, in theogens, look at the mystery of savant syndrome. People with severe developmental disabilities who suddenly display extraordinary abilities, perfect pitch photographic memory, the ability to calculate complex mathematics instantly, artistic genius that appears from nowhere, and the abilities often emerge after a head injury or during childhood when the brain is supposedly less developed. How does a damaged or underdeveloped brain suddenly produce greater capacities? It doesn't make sense if the brain creates consciousness, but it makes perfect sense if consciousness exists independently, and the brain is a limiter, a focuser. And when the limiter is damaged in certain ways, more of the consciousness that's always there shines through. More of the infinite intelligence that you are becomes accessible to your physical awareness. The evidence is in the reality of synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that happen far too often to be mere chance. You think of someone and they call, you need information, and the perfect book falls off the shelf. You make a decision and signs appear everywhere confirming you're on the right path. And Carl Jung studied this phenomenon extensively. He called it synchronicity, a causal meaningful connection, and he recognized it as evidence of the collective unconscious, of a deeper level of consciousness that connects everything and everyone. Exactly as the mystics taught, everything is connected, separation is illusion. And at the deeper levels of consciousness, your mind and my mind, and all minds are one mind, the universal consciousness expressing through infinite perspectives. The proof is in quantum entanglement. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, and it bothered him because it violated his understanding of reality. But it's been proven again and again. When two particles become entangled, they remain connected regardless of distance. Change the spin of one, and the other changes instantly, faster than light, beyond space-time, as if they're not really separate at all, but two expressions of one unified system. Exactly like the ancient mystics described. Consciousness, not separate individuals, but infinite expressions of one awareness. The one appearing as the many, unity playing at diversity. Consciousness exploring itself through infinite perspectives and experiences. The evidence is in the placebo effect, the proven, documented, scientifically verified fact that your beliefs about medicine can be as powerful as the medicine itself. People in placebo groups experience real healing, measurable changes. sometimes even side effects from medications they didn't actually take, because their consciousness, their belief, their expectation created the physical changes. And medical science still doesn't know how to fully explain this, because they refuse to accept the primary role of consciousness. They want matter to be primary, but the placebo effect proves consciousness shapes physical reality. Your beliefs and awareness literally restructure your biology, exactly as the mystics taught. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Your consciousness creates your experience, your awareness shapes your reality. You are not a helpless meat robot at the mercy of external circumstances. You are consciousness wielding immense creative power. Now, let's address where you are exactly in this cosmic game. The ancient mystery schools taught that physical existence is a school. Earth is not a prison unless you make it one. It's a training ground, a place where consciousness comes to experience, to learn, to evolve, to remember itself through the adventure of forgetting and then awakening. And you chose to be here before you were born. Your higher consciousness, your soul, selected this life, this body, these circumstances, these challenges, because they provide exactly the experiences needed for your evolution, for your expansion, for your awakening. And yes, that includes the painful stuff, the trauma, the struggles, the darkness, because contrast creates growth, challenges force expansion, and every obstacle you face is actually an opportunity for consciousness to know itself more fully, more deeply, more completely. The Tibetan teachings explain this beautifully with the concept of the tulku, the reincarnating lamas who choose their next incarnation consciously. They don't just die and get randomly assigned a new body. They select their next life deliberately based on where they can best serve, what they can best learn, what experiences they need. And everyone has this capacity. You just don't remember making the choice because the veil of forgetting descends when you enter physical form. But the mystics teach methods to recover those memories, to reconnect with your soul's purpose, to remember why you're here, what you came to do, who you really are beyond the temporary personality and circumstances. The ancient Egyptians called this the Pert Heru, the coming forth by day, the journey of the soul from darkness into light, from ignorance into knowledge, from sleep into awakening. And they understood that this journey happens in stages. You don't just wake up all at once. Consciousness expands gradually, layer by layer, dimension by dimension, and there are specific signs, specific experiences, specific realizations that mark your progress on the path. And if you're watching this right now, if these words are resonating in the depths of your being, you're in one of those stages. You're at a threshold, a turning point, a moment when consciousness is ready to expand into the next level of awareness. Here's what the ancient prophets and seers saw about this exact moment in history, and why they said you'd be exactly where you are right now. The Hopi elders spoke of the Great Purification, a time when humanity would face a choice between the path of technology without wisdom, which leads to destruction, and the path of consciousness with wisdom, which leads to a new world. And they said you'd know the time by the signs. The waters would turn black, the animals would disappear, strange sicknesses would emerge, the climate would change, and people would live in the sky, in buildings that reach to the heavens. And the young would turn away from the elders' wisdom, and people would walk around talking to boxes. And at that very moment, when it seems darkest, the consciousness shift would begin, and a new humanity would emerge. Those who remembered the old ways, the sacred ways, the ways of consciousness and spirit, and they would become the bridge to the new world. The Vedic texts describe this as the transition point in the Yuga cycle, the darkest hour before dawn, when Kali Yuga's materialism and separation and spiritual darkness reach their peak. And then the cycle turns and Satya Yuga begins to dawn. And those souls who incarnated specifically for this transition, the ones they call old souls or starseeds or light workers, would begin to wake up en masse. And they would remember their missions, their purposes, their divine nature, and they would become beacons of light, helping others awaken, creating the critical mass of consciousness needed to shift the entire species to the next level of evolution. The ancient Mayans encoded this in their calendar systems, not just one calendar, but multiple calendars tracking different cycles of time and consciousness. And their long count calendar marked the completion of a major cycle in 2012, which wasn't the end of anything, but the beginning of a new era. The transition from the fourth sun to the fifth sun, from one world age to another, from one state of collective consciousness to another. And we're living in that transition right now. These years, this decade, this is the birth of the new consciousness. And birth is messy and chaotic and painful, but it's also miraculous and necessary and beautiful. And you're here to be that birth, to midwife that birth, to embody that new consciousness. The Kabbalists describe this through the concept of Tikkun Olam, the healing and repair of the world. And they teach that in each generation there are souls who incarnate specifically to gather up the scattered sparks of divine consciousness, to elevate the fallen aspects of creation, to restore wholeness and balance. And this work requires people who are awake, who remember their divine nature, who can hold light in the darkness, who can maintain higher consciousness even when surrounded by chaos and ignorance. And that's you. That's why you're here, exactly at this moment, exactly in these circumstances, exactly with the unique gifts and perspectives and experiences that are yours alone. Now let's talk about what you do with this knowledge. Because awakening isn't passive. Understanding consciousness isn't just intellectual. This is about living it, being it, embodying it in every moment of your existence. The ancient mystery schools didn't just teach theory. They practiced specific techniques to expand consciousness, to activate dormant capacities, to navigate multiple dimensions of awareness. And these practices are as valid today as they were thousands of years ago because consciousness hasn't changed. Only our understanding of it has been suppressed and fragmented. But the technologies of awakening still work. Meditation is real technology for shifting consciousness. Breath work is real technology for altering your state. Sound and frequency are real technologies for tuning your vibration. Sacred geometry is real technology for organizing consciousness. Plant medicines used ceremonially are real technologies for expanding perception. And all of these were used by the ancient initiates because they work. They produce real results, real experiences, real expansion of consciousness. Start by simply observing consciousness itself. Become aware of awareness. Notice the one who is noticing. Watch your thoughts without identifying with them. Observe your emotions without being swept away by them. Witness your body without thinking you are the body. And in that witnessing, that observing, that pure awareness, you begin to discover what you really are. You're not the thoughts. You're the space in which thoughts arise. You're not the emotions. You're the awareness that experiences emotions. You're not the body. You're the consciousness that inhabits and animates the body. And this is the first step in all authentic spiritual traditions. The discrimination between the self and the not-self, the eternal and the temporary, consciousness and its contents. Practice meditation daily. And by meditation, I don't just mean sitting quietly. I mean training your consciousness to remain stable, present, aware, regardless of circumstances. Start with just watching your breath. The ancient practice of anapanasati that Buddha taught. Simply observe the breath entering and leaving your body. And when your mind wanders, gently bring it back. And in that simple practice repeated thousands of times, your consciousness strengthens, your awareness expands, your ability to remain present grows, and you begin to experience gaps between thoughts, moments of pure consciousness, and those gaps get longer, deeper, and eventually you realize the gaps are what you are: consciousness itself, pure awareness, the eternal witness, the unchanging self that exists before, during, and after all experiences. Work with your energy body, the chakra system that every ancient tradition recognized. These aren't just mystical concepts, they're actual energy centers that regulate how consciousness flows through your physical form. And when these centers are blocked or imbalanced, consciousness can't flow properly. You feel stuck, limited, disconnected. But through practices like yoga, qigong, pranayama, sound healing, you can clear and balance these centers. And as you do, consciousness expands, your perception opens, your abilities grow. You start accessing information and awareness that was always there but blocked. And this is what the mystics meant by opening the third eye. Not literally growing a new organ, but activating dormant capacities of consciousness, awakening perception beyond the physical senses. Study the ancient texts not as religious scripture, but as consciousness manuals: the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Emerald Tablet, the Gospel of Thomas. These aren't asking you to believe anything. They're describing direct experiences of consciousness, providing maps of inner territory, offering practices and perspectives that can help you have the same realizations, the same awakenings, the same expansions that the mystics experienced. And when you read them with eyes to see and ears to hear, you recognize the same truth being expressed in different languages, different cultures, different times, but pointing to the same reality, the same nature of consciousness, the same divine source, the same ultimate truth. Question everything you've been taught, not from cynicism, but from genuine inquiry. Examine your beliefs about reality, about consciousness, about who and what you are, and ask yourself, is this true, or is this just what I was told? Did I discover this through direct experience, or did I accept it on authority? Does this belief expand my consciousness or limit it? Does this perspective empower me or disempower me? And be willing to let go of beliefs that don't serve your evolution, even if everyone around you holds them, even if they're considered scientific or rational or obvious. Because the greatest barrier to awakening is not ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge, thinking you already know, being certain about things you've never actually investigated. And the mystics across all traditions emphasize the importance of beginner's mind. Approaching reality with fresh eyes, direct perception, without the filters of conditioning and belief. Connect with nature, because nature is consciousness expressing in physical form without the distortions of human ego and conditioning. Spend time in forests, by oceans, under stars, and feel the consciousness that pervades all things, the intelligence that organizes ecosystems, the awareness that flows through every living thing, and recognize that the same consciousness that grows trees and spins galaxies and beats your heart is what you are. You're not separate from nature. You're not in nature. You are nature becoming conscious of itself. And the more time you spend in natural settings, especially away from human-made electromagnetic frequencies and urban chaos, the easier it becomes to hear the subtle voice of your higher consciousness, your soul, your connection to the infinite. Practice heart coherence, because your heart is not just a pump, it's a consciousness center. The ancient Egyptians believed the heart was the seat of the soul, and modern science is discovering they were right. Your heart has its own nervous system, its own form of intelligence. It generates the strongest electromagnetic field in your body. And when your heart is coherent, when you're feeling gratitude, love, compassion, appreciation, your heart's electromagnetic field becomes organized and powerful. And that field affects your brain, your body, everyone around you, and it connects you to the quantum field, to the unified consciousness, to what the ancients called the Akashic records, the field of infinite information and intelligence. And from that state of heart coherence, you can access wisdom, guidance, healing, knowing that comes from beyond your individual consciousness, from the greater consciousness of which you're a part. Work with your dreams consciously, because as we discussed, dreams aren't just random neural noise. They're actual experiences of consciousness operating at different frequencies, exploring different dimensions, and you can learn to become lucid in your dreams, aware that you're dreaming while still dreaming. And when you do, you're literally experiencing consciousness freed from physical constraints, operating in a realm where thought instantly creates reality, where you can fly, teleport, shape-shift, visit other dimensions, communicate with higher aspects of yourself. And this isn't fantasy, this is training, learning to operate as pure consciousness, preparing for the greater liberation that comes with physical death. And the ancient Tibetan dream yoga practices were designed exactly for this purpose, using dreams as a laboratory for consciousness, a training ground for navigating the bardas. Fast periodically, because when you abstain from food, when you give your body a break from constant digestion, your consciousness shifts. Energy that normally goes to processing food becomes available for processing consciousness, for spiritual awareness, for psychic perception, and every mystical tradition includes fasting as a practice, not because they were primitive and didn't understand nutrition, but because they understood that consciousness operates differently in fasted states. The veil between dimensions gets thinner, your intuition sharpens, your perception expands, and you remember that you're not this body. You're the consciousness inhabiting this body, and you don't need to fast for weeks, even 24 hours. Even skipping one meal with conscious intention can shift your awareness. Cultivate silence, actual periods of silence where you don't speak, don't consume media, don't fill every moment with stimulation and noise, because in silence, deeper aspects of consciousness can emerge, your higher self can speak, wisdom can arise, realizations can occur. And this is why meditation retreats emphasize silence, why monks take vows of silence, why the mystics would spend years in caves and deserts away from the noise of civilization. Not because they were escaping life, but because they were diving into life, into consciousness itself, into the deeper dimensions of awareness that are always present but drowned out by constant external stimulation. Study synchronicities in your life. Pay attention to meaningful coincidences, recurring numbers, unexpected meetings, books that appear at the perfect time, messages that come through songs or conversations or dreams, because these are how your higher consciousness, your soul, your guides, the universe itself communicates with you. And the more attention you pay to synchronicities, the more they appear, because attention is consciousness, and where you place your consciousness, reality responds. You're in a constant conversation with the intelligent universe, but most people are so distracted, so caught in mental noise, they miss the signals, they don't see the signs, they don't recognize that consciousness is constantly trying to guide them, support them, show them the path. Practice presence, which means being fully here, fully now, not lost in thoughts about past or future. Because the present moment is the only place where consciousness actually exists. The past is memory, the future is imagination, but this moment, right now, this eternal now, this is where consciousness is. This is where life happens. This is where power and choice and awareness actually exist. And when you're fully present, you're fully conscious, you're fully alive. And paradoxically, when you're fully present, time seems to expand. You get more done, not less. Life becomes richer, not duller, because you're no longer spreading your consciousness across multiple moments. You're bringing all of it into this moment. And that concentrated consciousness has power, has creative force, has the ability to shape reality, exactly as the mystics taught. Now, here's what you need to understand about the bigger picture, the cosmic context of why this matters so much right now. We're not just individuals waking up, we're part of a collective awakening, a species-wide shift in consciousness. And this has happened before on Earth. There have been previous civilizations that achieved high states of consciousness, the ancient Atlanteans and Lemurians that legends speak of. And they fell, they collapsed, they destroyed themselves because they developed technology and power without wisdom, without spiritual maturity, without understanding the sacred responsibility that comes with expanded consciousness. And we're at that same choice point now. We have nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, technologies that could either elevate humanity or destroy it. And the only thing that determines which direction we go is consciousness, our level of awareness, our spiritual maturity, our recognition of our interconnection, our remembrance of our divine nature. And here's the secret that the ancient prophets knew. The future isn't fixed. We're not heading towards some predetermined fate. The future is fluid, probability, potential, and it's being shaped right now by collective consciousness, by the thoughts, feelings, beliefs, intentions of every person on the planet. And that means you matter. Your awakening matters. Your consciousness matters. Every time you choose love over fear, awareness over unconsciousness, truth over illusion, unity over separation, you're shifting the collective field. You're adding light to the morphic field. You're making it easier for others to awaken. And this is the real meaning of being a light worker or a way shower. Not some grandiose ego identity, but simply being someone who maintains higher consciousness and by doing so, helps others access that same consciousness. The ancient mystery schools understood this through the concept of the 100th monkey effect, which modern research has actually documented. When a certain number of individuals in a collective learn something new or change a behavior, suddenly the entire collective shifts. Even members who had no physical contact with the initial group, because consciousness is eno and local. We're all connected through the quantum field, through what Jung called the collective unconscious. And this means that every individual awakening contributes to collective awakening. There's a tipping point, a critical mass, and we might be very close to that point right now. Which is why so many are waking up simultaneously, why you're here watching this, why the veils are thinning, why the old structures are crumbling, why everything seems to be accelerating. Consciousness is approaching a phase transition, a quantum leap, and you're part of that leap. The ancient Vedic seers described this as the Lila, the divine play, consciousness playing hide and seek with itself, the one pretending to be many, the infinite pretending to be finite, God experiencing what it's like to forget it's God, so that remembering can be sweet, so that awakening can be ecstatic, so that the journey can be meaningful. And you're not broken for forgetting. You're not flawed for struggling. You're exactly where you're supposed to be in the game, playing the role perfectly. And the suffering you've experienced, the challenges you've faced, the darkness you've walked through, none of it was wasted. All of it was preparation. All of it was training. All of it was shaping you into a consciousness capable of holding more light, more truth, more awareness, more love. The Hermetic principle of polarity teaches that opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Light and dark are the same thing at different intensities. And you can't know light without experiencing darkness. You can't appreciate joy without knowing sorrow. You can't understand unity without experiencing separation. And this entire physical reality, this entire game of form and duality, exists so that consciousness can know itself fully, can experience itself completely, can realize itself utterly. And that's what you're doing here. You're not trying to escape physicality. You're trying to bring consciousness into physicality, to embody spirit, to anchor light in matter, to demonstrate that it's possible to be fully human and fully divine simultaneously. The Buddhist teaching of form is emptiness. Emptiness is form points to the same truth. The physical world is not separate from consciousness. Matter is not separate from spirit. They're two aspects of one reality, and the goal isn't to reject one for the other, but to realize their unity, to live from that realization, to be in the world but not of it, to play the game while knowing it's a game, to take it seriously without taking it too seriously. And this is the razor's edge that awakened. Beings walk, fully engaged with life, yet never identified with it. Fully present, yet always aware of the deeper reality beyond appearances. Now, as we come to the culmination of this journey through consciousness, I want you to take a moment and really feel what's been stirring inside you as you've absorbed these words. Because that stirring, that resonance, that recognition, that's your true self remembering who it is. That's consciousness awakening to itself. That's you arriving exactly where the ancient mystics said you'd be. You're not reading this by accident. You're not here by chance. You chose this moment before you were born, and now you're remembering why. So the question is, what will you do with this remembering? Will you go back to sleep? Or will you stay awake? Will you forget again? Or will you keep remembering? The choice is yours, and it always has been, because you're not a victim, you're a creator. You're not lost, you're on a journey, and you're not alone. You're part of the greatest awakening in human history. The ancient ones are watching, smiling, because you're finally coming home to the truth they preserved for you across thousands of years. Welcome back, beautiful soul. Welcome back. If this resonated with you, if something deep inside recognized the truth in these words, then you're ready for more. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we're diving deeper into the forbidden knowledge, the hidden mysteries, the ancient wisdom that changes everything. Share this with someone who's ready to wake up. And remember, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. See you in the next awakening.